Well, I think these four guys in these names that you started to see, and Maura and Justin both, put it in their notes last night.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Pham, Mark Hanna, Cody Bellinger, Lane Thomas. Any of those four, if not two or three of those four, make your group a whole lot better. The fact that Colton Wong is still getting significant at-bats, and I know on this homestand he had a couple big hits, but he's a negative 1.4 player. I mean, it is.
He's been terrible.
157, 240, 208 slugging. It's a 448 on base plus slugging through 200 at-bats. I mean, this is it's untenable. It's an untenable situation. AJ, finally, thankfully, they put him to rest on the IL a little bit because likewise, it just is you're 547 OPS, a negative WAR once again. Like these are just anchors. So as you're trying to turn, as you're trying to win some of these series, trying to get a sweep, can I just have competency? And of those four names that I just mentioned right there, I mean, Lane Thomas has been more than that. Bellinger has been much, much more than that. Canna is a guy that has played on the West Coast in Oakland for a lot of years, has come up and understands how to hit in this ballpark. And Tommy Pham is seemingly a name that's been thrown around for almost, I don't know.
I got to tell you, man, of those names, I'm intrigued with Logan Thomas. Cody Bellinger, you get for the rest of this year, and then he can opt out at the end of this year. He's got a mutual option.
Lane Thomas.
Sorry.
What did I say? Logan Thomas, the old Virginia Tech
quarterback. Sorry, Lane Thomas,
yes.
Excuse me. Lane Thomas, intriguing because you get him until 2026.
Yep.
Tommy Pham, I don't want any part of. I'm sorry. There's too much drama. There's too much going on around him all the time. I just don't think that I could. I'm not saying he's Milton Bradley because he's not, but it's a volatility that I would not welcome into this clubhouse right now, given where this team is at and what they need to do to kind of get back to where they need to be. Cody Bellinger, I love the player. I love that I would have loved to have seen them try to sign him in the offseason, but he's on a 1-year deal with a mutual option for next year. And so if you're Cody Bellinger after a good season, why would you play the next year at $12.5 million when you could walk out and get more money somewhere else? So I don't know.
Okay, so Lane Thomas, Mark Hanna. I think those would be the two of those four that I would agree with.
Mark Hanna, I can have some conversation about. He's 34.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about him a little bit last week. Veteran player, good at bats. Sure. I mean, that's not a significant move, but yeah, all right. If you want to bring in Mark Hanna to be your fourth outfielder, great. But Brock, well, you told me, you said you wanted significant moves.
Yes.
Mark Hanna is not a significant move.
For this roster, he'd be a significant move.
He'd be an upgrade.
Lane Thomas for this roster would be a significant move. They would be significant upgrades, significant moves for a team that is still pitching and defending and competing and playing in a way that frankly deserves it. I mean, the fact that these two, unfortunately, that AJ and Colton have played, now AJ not as much, but Colton is still playing significant amounts.
I know.
And it's just painful. And I hate this, and I hate this reaction, but I am a fan. And I'm not going to hide that. I am an emotional, at times irrational fan. And after overcoming the playoff drought from a season ago and all of the goodwill and all of the emotion and the 350,000 people that came in there over the last 10 days, right? When you talk about feeding the beast and feeding the enthusiasm and feeding that and priming the pump of your fans that are in, they want to be in. And it's been a turbulent in this year. I think that they deserve at least one, if not two, of those guys and those bats to make a move and go compete.
Well, those guys aren't free. I mean, like, you want to go get them, you're going to have to go give up something of value to go get them.
So that's the first wave of it. Then the next wave of it is other than Julio and Kirby, everybody else is on the table. I think everybody else has got to be on that table. And I would love to see Teo continue to get a little bit hot here. Now, obviously, if you move him for a Lane Thomas or whatever you're going to do for some long-term vision, and Jerry hinted at that.
That's making two different trades, right?
Totally understood. Yeah. Absolutely. But Jerry kind of hinted at that, over the last few weeks.
Buying and selling has always been a possibility for them. He was very clear on Thursday that selling is just a straight-up option.
No, and it never has been. I think in when you've asked that question in the past, I've always tried to answer it as honestly as I can. We are always, 1 foot in camp of buyer and 1 foot in the camp of the seller, believing that the best way to approach any trade deadline is with the mindset of how do we make the Mariners better? And it's a broad question that can be answered in a lot of ways.
And by the way, that is different today than it was 24 months ago. than it was 4 years ago, than it was 14 years ago. Like how, and for your organization, I think that is what has struck me the most through last year's trade deadline, through this offseason, is your acquisition phase. It is not a level playing field. So how you then go about it, the creativity that it may take. Sometimes, if you're not going to overpay and way overpay in free agency, and I understand that, then is there a time where I'm sorry, we're going to have to overpay on this trade a little bit. But in order to get a piece for the next 3 or 4 years, that's what
and they did that last year. I mean, that's what they did for Castillo. They went harder after Castillo than anybody else did, which is why they beat out the Yankees for him, which is why they ended up advancing past the Yankees in the playoffs last year, and people were, pointing to that for good reason. They were hyper aggressive when it came to going out and acquiring Luis Castillo. And if there was a Luis Castillo available right now, that kind of player, Brock, I'm right there with you. The Mariners absolutely need to make moves to improve their roster long term. I think first and third base, the corner infield spots are all of the sudden very much in play. I'm not just looking at the outfield. I'm very much looking at what you're going to do long term at first base, at second base, and at third base. I think all of them need to be question marks that need to be filled out for the Mariners. So in terms of having moves to make, I'm there with you. I don't see a player necessarily that fits in the same Luis Castillo mold. Now, maybe there's somebody available that we don't know about, but when I'm reading, and I read all the time, all the trade rumors stuff, those 4 guys you mentioned, yeah, they help. I mean, not Tommy Pham. I'm out on that, and I don't know that Bellinger's the right fit contract-wise for them, just in terms of where he's at. But yeah, those other 2 guys would help. Are they going to significantly change your roster? No. And maybe you don't need to. And that's sort of what I would come back to when you say, Brock, and you wrote this last night.
It was an irrational spot. I don't even know what I wrote.
Well, just saying that perception matters a lot this week. I just don't think you can afford to think that way. I don't think you can afford to pay any attention to perception. You have to build the best baseball team you can. You cannot start listening to the noise outside that says you need this, you need that, you need this. You have to trust yourself and do what it is that you believe is best for the organization. Are people going to be mad if they sell? Yeah, of course they are. But you have to do what's right for your organization.